Verse 11, he has made everything beautiful in its time. God does everything at just the right time. Now, let's make a clear distinction about that. When I say that God does everything at just the right time, God does not do everything at the time that Jason thinks it's right, okay? Now, because if we're going to get down to that, I've got a few suggestions, right? Like, I've got a few suggestions about timing and how things should work. But God does everything at just the right time. And if you knew everything that God knew, which you never will, but if you did, you would say the same thing. God does everything at just the right time. He doesn't do everything at the time you think it's right. He's not beholding to like you praying a specially worded prayer and that now makes you force his hand to do something. That's not how it works. But he does everything at just the right time. You are not in charge. You are not God. Or you think you could be God? And I mean, you know, in my arrogance, Jason, sometimes I think, man, I don't get the timing of that, Lord. Like, I would do it differently. Right, like I think that this would be better right here if this could happen. I don't get this. You think you have a right to question God? And of course I would say no, but I still do question God. Right? Like we would say no, that's the answer. That's how you get a piece of candy in junior church. No, you can't question God. Good job, Jimmy. Here's your piece of candy. Yay! But inside, I'm questioning God. You think your timing would be better than the sovereign God of the universe? Absolutely. You know who else thought that? Was Job. And so in your own time, read chapter 38 and 39 and the first couple verses of 40 of Job. It's such a great, powerful passage, okay? But here's Job, and Job hasn't really sinned until he begins to demand that God tell him why God's done what he's done with Job. He begins to demand and assume that God owes him an answer and owes him an explanation. And here comes God with this theological beatdown. So chapter 38, verse 4, God's like, okay, you want to question me? Well, let me throw a couple questions at you. And he's like, dress yourself like a man. Here you go. Verse 4. Okay, so you want to question me? Let me ask you this first, though. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Well, we're going to be technical. I wasn't there. Do you know who determined the measurements of the earth and of the universe? Job, have you ever commanded the days or the morning since your days began? Have you ever commanded the sun to rise from a human perspective or the sun to set? Well, no. Have you walked in the recesses of the deep? Talking about the great depths of the ocean. Can you send forth lightning? No, it'd be kind of nice if I could. I got a couple places I'd like to send it, but I can't do that. Can you satisfy, this is all in Job 38 and 39. Can you satisfy, Job, the appetite of the young lions? Can you feed them when they need it? Do you give the horse his might? Is it by your understanding that the hawk soars? Chapter 40, verse 2. Should a fault finder contend with the Almighty? And I love Job's answer, and there's so much more. Chapter 38 and 39 is just verse after verse of this, when God's like, do you really have the right to sit in judgment and question me? So Job, his response is in chapter 40, verse 4. Behold, I am of small account. I lay my hand on my mouth. Like Job's response to that is, I'm small. I'm just going to quit talking now. For everything there is a season. And when we have a view of the sovereign God of the universe, we may not always understand the timing now, but for everything there is a season. God ordains, God orchestrates, He is Lord. He has made everything beautiful in its time. We were made to live for Him. We were created for His glory. And so when we're talking about the idea of loneliness and emptiness, like that's the theme of this series because it keeps jumping off the pages of Ecclesiastes. That's what the writer's trying to get us to see, that life apart from God is this empty life. It is this feeling of loneliness. So we were made to live for Him and we were created for His glory. And it shouldn't be a surprise that we find loneliness and emptiness when we pursue meaning apart from our Creator. It shouldn't surprise us that if we reject the light that is Jesus, that when we turn away, it's impossible to see clearly and there seems to be a darkness. We've turned from the light. That's why there's darkness. Verse 11 again, we're told, he has put eternity into man's heart. He's put eternity in. He's given us a taste of eternity. We weren't created to die. We were created to live. And sin brought death. Our sin brings death. He has put eternity in our hearts. That's why in every one of us there is this inner, deep longing for things that satisfy forever. And the Bible tells us he has put that into our hearts. So it's not that there's no joy in the here and now, right? Of course there is. There's joy in sport. There's joy in music. There's joy in feasting, in hiking, in gardening, in building. The list goes on and on. There's joy, God-given joy in all of those things. But those things in and of themselves will never satisfy. They will never give you the meaning and the permanence that we hope and spend our money that they'll actually will do. They'll never do it. This is why, in part, that Mondays are Mondays. You know what I'm talking about? Like, Monday. Because it's back to the grind. And we as a culture, we've spent the weekend worshiping at the temple of sports, at the temple of festivals, a temple of food and music. We spend our hard-earned money to escape. That's what we do, living for the weekend. But Monday still comes. And reality brings us back, and we're back to the cycle. But God has put eternity into our hearts so that we would turn to him. That we would turn and look for him and find meaning in him. The only place we can find true meaning. The only one who has an answer for eternity.